Hello, this is the Pretty Pause podcast. I am your host, Anna Wickham, and today we're taking a sociological spin, and we're going to be looking at 10 myths about the LGBTQ community, but I am going to speak and do research mainly in the sociology field, as that is my major, and I am more focused on sex and sexuality in sociology and biosociology. So, yeah. Get into it. Okay, so this is what I got. There's 10, and I'm not really interested in their opinion per se, but more just answering the question on my own. We will go over their evidence because, just make sure that this is a good source. I'm not saying this is a good source to get myths from the LGBTQ community, but we're gonna just look through it anyways. Myth 1, gender identity is your biological gender from birth, as well as how others perceive your gender. Perception is subjective. Anyone can perceive you as anything. Any society has different definitions that meet the criteria of what makes masculinity, femininities, which are gender characteristic traits. Gender identity is not biological at all. There has been plenty of studies that actually show how gender identity does not always match your sex, which is what the biological gender should be titled as sex. There is no such thing as biological gender. You cannot study gender, you cannot study gender expression, and you cannot study gender identity through biology, genes, any of that. Chromosomes, it doesn't work like that. They say gender identity is entirely personal. It's how you experience your gender internally and think about yourself. There's no such thing as a biological gender since it's a societal construct. That is great. Love it. Straight to the point. Okay, myth 2. Some people choose to be gay. This is actually very interesting because in sociology, sex and sexuality, we actually study how there is no biological causes for sexuality that we can see today with today's science. And it's very interesting because it's not a choice, but there's nothing inherently biological about sexuality. The way sexuality is structured is all societal, including heterosexuality. There is no gay or straight test or bisexual test because we can't figure out what makes somebody gay, bisexual, straight, unless the only way we can tell someone's sexuality is communication, socialization. And those are social constructs. How you communicate, how you socialize, all depends where you grew up, all of that jazz. So it's interesting. The biggest, and I will link this below, the biggest biological research on sexuality was in 2019, and they found links to sexual behavior through gene placements in the chromosomes and smells and pheromones. But those in heightened sexuality, they're not necessarily sexuality. And we know this because even with that research on sexual behavior, there's people in the LGBTQ community that don't face that same sexual desire, but they're still homosexual, they're still straight, they're still bi, they're still pan. And that research doesn't work with today's science of asexuals exist, all these people exist, polyamorous people exist, bisexual people exist, and that 2019 study, if deemed accurate, for one, doesn't even mention sexuality, it mentions sexual behavior in the results, so not even the same thing, but it also cancels out a lot of those other known communities and groups. Okay, what did they say? Sexuality is not a choice. That is how the person is born. Like we do not choose to be heterosexual person. People do not choose to be homosexual, bisexual, or pansexual. That is true. No one chooses to be gay. True. As much as no one chooses to be straight. True. Similarly, counseling or therapy can't change someone's sexuality. True. This sort of counseling, generally referred to as conversion therapy, increases the likelihood of depression, anxiety, drug use, and suicide, particularly amongst teenagers and adolescents. So I find it interesting how they are calling this counseling, because for one, I would not consider that counseling, but two, it actually points out what a lot of past psychologists and biologists were doing in the medical community. the idea that unisex people were deviant was pushed by psychologists and biologists back at the time because it didn't fit the norms of society. And so they were like, oh, we have a solution. Let's just do surgeries. And everyone's like, yes, fix it to formalities. And so it's very interesting how they're also bringing up how the medical field and some aspects, including its counseling and all that, was very homophobic. The fight against biologists from the LGBTQ community has been a fight that's been reoccurring, actually. When I did my research on males, I'm going to say males, biological advantages, I actually alluded to it being a sociological issue and a sociological construction, arguing that sexism, and I'm not going to go too deep into it because there's a whole study. If you want to read the study, you can go to my website, which will be in the description, the Free to Pause podcast website, and you can read it yourself. And it basically just goes over all the social institutions that may have created this biological disadvantage that biology didn't, in my opinion, create. Okay, so myth 3. It's perfectly fine to continue referring to trans person by their birth name once they've chosen a new name. So no, it's not perfectly fine. Depends on what perfectly fine is to you, but most trans people would not be okay with that. And most people, we're gonna keep it, I'm not gonna say all, because I'm not gonna speak for all, but like most trans people don't change their name and expect you to still use the old one, right? Like, you don't change something if you want to be called it, right? So, I just don't do that. This is called dead naming. Yes, referring to someone with their dead name can trigger anxiety amongst trans people, and it invalidates a trans person's identity and experience. While accidents or slip-ups may occur, it's best to always address a trans person by both their chosen name as well as the pronouns which they identify. If you don't know their name or pronouns, just ask them, what is the name and pronouns you go by? Yeah, communication. Wow, a lot of the problems it solves. Myth 4. If you encounter someone who is believed is a man but looks and acts in what you perceive to be a feminine manner, you should take your best guess as to their pronouns. No, do not guess. This isn't a guessing game. This shouldn't be a guessing game. It's simple. Just ask. Ask a simple question. If it's that important to where you need to talk to them, ask. The only way that guessing is okay, not even okay, but like excusable, is if the person is knocked out, unresponsive, any other issue that typically the normal person wouldn't be dealing with anyways, that would be ambulance, that'd be hospitals and all that, is okay to assume their pronouns because, you can't ask the question. But other than that, try to keep assumptions non-existent. Like, why assume something when you can literally get the knowledge yourself? We can't guess someone's gender identity. It is not our determination to make for someone else. If you're unsure of how someone would like to be addressed, you should simply ask them directly for the pronouns they go by. Yeah, just ask. Myth 5. Gay men love to dress like women because they secretly wish they were women. Likewise, lesbians wish they were men and dress as such. I mean, interesting study, but I highly doubt that's what's going on. The beginning of the gay rights movement actually stems from feminist movements. And so lavender language is very feminine in how you speak it. Yes, well, that's AAVE, lavender language. It's really hard because we take a lot, the community takes a lot from AAVE, but lavender language is also something we use. And it goes by many names depending on the country and the region, but lavender language is typically what is known by bisexologists and sociologists alike. And the reason why men do that is to eradicate the oppression that having two genders and being perfectly fit to one creates. And it's also to normalize cats. It's also to normalize women and feminine things in society and say, hey, it's not necessarily bad, it's not necessarily less, it just is. What did they say? Being gay does not mean that the person identifies as a member of opposite gender. Sexuality is different from gender identity, and they do not have correlations with each other. Yeah, sexuality and gender are very different, gender-neutral bathrooms are exclusively for LGBTQIA plus people. Cis heterosexual people should only use clearly marked men's or women's restrooms. This is so wrong. Okay, there's plenty of things in society that you use that weren't originally for you. And when I mean you, I mean straight, white, cis males, blah, 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 blah. Sex ed is one of them. LGBTQIA in the 1970s during the AIDS epidemic fought for sex education because their community was dying from STDs and STIs at an alarming rate because politicians didn't really want to do anything. They didn't really care. It took too long to do anything. And it's the gay community. Nobody really cared about them at the time. And so they were really suffering. So free contraceptives and sex education was fought by LGBTQ activists. And then it was turned heteronormative because why not? So the idea that you don't use things LGBTQIA people fought for? Interesting. Imagine a cis man babysitting a girl child and the child needs to use the restroom. Gender-neutral bathrooms are meant to be used by everyone regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, or ability. Yeah, it's literally a restroom, babes. Use it. I don't care. It's better for LGBTQIA plus employees to be closeted at the workplace. Being out can impede productivity. Productivity as out employees are more likely to think about sex at work and or face discrimination for their orientation. Plus, it can be distraction for coworkers. For one, your coworkers' distractions are not your issue. It's not your problem. Second, there is a stereotype that being LGBTQ plus automatically makes you more unprofessional in the way you speak, elaborate language, very feminine, and historically, the way feminine people are, or women, is considered not abnormal, but it's considered a systematic oppression. Women have faced oppression, and people allude to biological rules and guidelines that don't actually really exist to oppress women. And so because homophobia is just sexism for LGBTQ people or gay people, because there's different terms for the other letters like transphobia and stuff, is literally just sexism, because mainly what we're getting attacked for is being more feminine and doing things that women should be doing, like dating a man, that's a woman's job. Speaking very high pitch and very feminine, that's a woman's role. Crying or being emotional, that's a woman's role. And there is actually no biological evidence to support this, but pop off, I guess. And impede productivity, I mean, I don't see how that's true. I mean, we could look at studies between how good or how productive straights are versus gay people and trans people and queer people and all of that. I highly doubt it's the sexuality, if anything, that's impeding productivity for any employee. And then there was another point. Think about sex. I mean, I don't know what goes on gay people's minds. I highly doubt at work, though, they're thinking about sex. I mean, again, that's a question you'd have to do research on. Like, you'd have to do a survey and stuff. And I'm doing enough surveys right now. There's some recent surveys I'm working on with people. Okay, I don't need this. I don't need this just to smoke. So closeted employees are oftentimes less productive because they spend their energy hiding an integral part of themselves. Is there a source at the end of this? I'm interested. What? A good exercise, try talking about your weekend without once mentioning the gender of the people you spent it with. Okay, so I do see what they're trying to get at. So because LGBTQ people might feel the need to change their story in a way that hides who the identity of someone is, can be less productive because you're spending too much time trying to explain a scenario that happened to you gender neutrally so nobody finds out, and that can take time. Having to remember to use they instead of he or she and all that can lead to less productive time. So yeah, I mean, I guess that works. When someone comes out to you as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, it's fine to let other people know about that person's decision to come out. It's public news anyways, right? It's also fine to mention that you knew about their identity or orientation for a long time and assume that they probably came out to you because they're attracted to you if you're of the relevant sex. Never okay to disclose anyone's information. Well, okay. The moral and ethical argument, it's not okay. I mean, you can. No one's stopping you. You shouldn't. But I would say it's not fine. And no, don't do it. And then to assume that they're attracted to you, no. End it. Stop it. For one, why are you worried about who I'm attracted? Why are you worried about if I'm attracted to you? If you're straight anyways, like, I mean, it's about ego at this point. If they automatically, okay, for one, you shouldn't automatically mention that you know their identity from the start, even if you think it's because they're attracted to you, because that's an assumption and it's problematic. And if it were to go wrong or was wrong, you'd be in a lot of trouble. Anyways, they're not attracted to you unless they specifically say they're attracted to you. Okay? I mean, I can see a very minute percentage of the population coming out to see how you react, and if you react good, they could either develop a crush or they could just be testing the waters, but most likely it's not that. The decision to come out is an incredibly personal and often difficult decision to make, regardless of how long it took someone to come out or how easy their announcement appeared to be. You should never assume it's okay to share the news on their behalf. Deciding when to come out and who to come out to is entirely up to the person. Refrain from making any comments relating to knowing of their orientation. This can invalidate their choice to speak out or take away from the power of their coming out moment. Oh, and never assume someone comes out to you because they're attracted to you. The moment is not about you. Okay, perfectly said. Better said than what I said, okay? I love that. We're going with that. Okay, as opposed to other letters in the community, bisexuality is generally a short-term phase. Bisexual, oh my god, me as a bisexual, oh my god, short-term. Bisexual people are also more promiscuous than straight people. Is short-lived. Bisexual people tend to identify as gay or lesbian later on in life. Okay. I find it interesting how we're more promiscuous than straight people when straight people make up majority of the population, like about 90%. So, I mean, I guess, but no. In all fairness, we don't even make up a majority of the population. So, more promiscuous than like 90% of the population. I think we need a lot of data to be done with that. And a short-term phase. So bisexual can be an umbrella term if you're using it as an umbrella term, but it doesn't say that umbrella term of bisexual, just as bisexual. So I'm going to say no, because there is a term that is bisexual that is short-term and not the umbrella term when either you're still figuring it out or you think blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to say no. And bisexual people tend to identify as gay or lesbian later on in life. I mean, okay, so there's multiple ways you can construct this. So it is very common for people in the LGBTQ community to identify as two or more labels, like being gay and being queer. A lot of people will say, oh, I'm queer, I'm gay, blah, 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 blah. And bisexuals might do the same thing. Oh, I'm bisexual, but if they have a preference for one gender, which is still bisexuality, they can say, oh, I'm a bisexual, gay. I say gay sometimes, and my friends are like, I thought you were bisexual. I'm like, yeah, I kind of use them synonymously because it fits my preference. Anyways, but I would not say it's short-lived because majority of the LGBTQ population is bisexual, and with that logic, either it would be or it's going to be that gay, lesbian, and all those other identities also then become the majority over bisexuality. But because bisexuality keeps having a percentage advantage through population, it's safe to say that it's not a short-lived term, or a short term, not lived. Bisexual is a person who has romantic and or sexual indications for people of more than one gender. I love this definition. it's not always just men and women. Any two genders that they are attracted to is bisexuality. I love this. Some homosexual people who identify as bisexual may come out later in life as gay. However, typically bisexual people have a lifelong attraction to people of more than one gender. Bisexuality is not a phase. Bisexuality is an orientation, persists regardless of whether the individual is single or in a relationship with an individual of one gender. Thus, a bisexual partnered with a same gender person does not become gay, and a bisexual partnered with a person of another gender does not become straight. I love this. Yes, myth number 9 coming in with the clutch. I love that. Okay, myth 10. A person whose biological sex is a female but feels man inside is still a female. There's a lot of ways I can take this argument. There's a lot. There's a lot. Okay, for one, what is female, what is male? Because last time I checked your biology, kind of like gender expression, it's kind of a little bit of both. I mean, I believe there's 4 criteria we use to determine sex anyways, and not all 4 of those criteria are on the same page. Chromosomes, sexual organs, what else? Genomes, and there's another one, I believe. Gametes, I believe. And hormones. Hormones are also another, sex hormones specifically. Yeah, I might have said one that was supposed to be hormones because there was 4 last time I checked, but there could be 5. I don't know. And not all of those are on the same page. Like men whose sexual reproductive organs are male may have more estrogen than normal, and might have estrogen to match a female and testosterone to match a female. And so it's like all 4 of those compartments, they'll communicate and work together to create your sex. Might not always agree on what that sex is. So we would consider these people intersex, or asexual, depending. And yeah, that's what I'm gonna go with, because it's like, it's hard. There's also biological studies that show when people that transition typically transition to the gender that their biology most matches, like brain function and hormones, typically match. I don't know. I'll try to find that study, because I think I'm wording it really wrong. Because if that were true, then hormone replacement and hormone blockers would not be necessary. But like, they typically carry more characteristics in the gender they transition to anyways. They do not use that as a way to figure out people's gender identity. I would not recommend it. However, someone experiences their gender identity should be accepted and respected without judgment or stereotypes on what the gender should be. This should be regardless of the sex they were assigned at birth or how they express themselves currently. In this case, the person is a trans man and they identify as a man and should be treated as a man. Disclaimer: the statements and opinions expressed in this article are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the positions of the ThoughtWorks. Okay. So, I mean, let's talk about, I do. Okay. Yes, I agree. Gender identity. Although you brought up biological sex and then switched to gender identity. So, confused, but I get what you're saying and I agree. Anyways, this was actually really good. The first ones, they were kind of scary. They were kind of, I don't know. And then like, as I went down, I was like, oh my God, like, this is really good. This is top tier. Anyways, I agree with this article. I'm gonna link it down below, and then I'm also gonna find those research articles and kind of just put them in, kind of go over each myth, give you that data, give you that study, and yeah. Bye.